Hi, everybody. Welcome to Untapped Azania with myself, Maureen, and of course,
Nasty.
Meshti. Okay, so this is like our second episode. We're excited to be back. I'm excited for the first episode and how it went about. So, how are you feeling today, Mesh? How are you feeling about our first episode dropping? What's that motion like?
I feel good. I'm happy that we finally got the ball rolling.
Finally.
We know how long, how much work we put into getting this little dojo of ours running. So I'm glad. Um, I actually think that we did better than we thought,
Yeah.
just in terms of the
Yeah.
numbers, just in terms of what we had put in. We literally worked on the trailers, worked on the rollout on a day, and then we
Yeah.
did it. So I think that was great, just the whole experience. So I'm looking forward to what unfolds, what happens with this, where we take it. Yeah,
That's
uncharted
great.
territory.
That's me as well. I feel excited. I feel like I even just like getting feedback from people. It was just like a lot of people saying there's a lot of potential, and I think that's what I was kind of tapping into because the whole thing is about untapped stuff. Like we
Yeah.
haven't tapped into a lot of potential that we could go. So I'm really excited about that. I am also interested in finding out what you've been tapping into in the past couple of weeks. Like what's been going on in your brains? What have
Yeah.
you like picked up? What's exciting? What's going on?
Um, so more so, I think I'll just focus on recently because if
Yeah.
we go into what's been picking my brain for the past month or so, it's been a lot of stuff. But recently, obviously, what's been happening in Kenya, I think that was interesting for me, especially just how the youth came together
Yeah.
and they were able to get what they want.
Once.
Solana, more crypto stuff. So like Solana, an investment company called Van Eck applied to have a Solana ETF launched. So I think they want to be the pioneers of like traditional investment management companies investing in
Can-
Solana. So that was really dope. The Euros, that's been nice. A lot of outsets. I didn't think Croatia was gonna go out so soon. Yeah, I think that I'm rooting for France, and they've been going through a lot. I think they struggled to score. By the time they actually went through to the next round, they had not scored a goal. I think they only scored a penalty against Poland. So, I mean, that was the first time they scored. So I'm hoping they score a bit more going into the knockout rounds. The US elections
The
also,
debate. I
the
saw the
debate was
debate.
a
I was
mess.
like,
The debate was a mess. I think I think the Democrats are in a predicament. I think
saw
they
that.
somewhat need to make a choice. Are they going to stick with Joe Biden? I mean, everyone kind of I think Americans have sort of realized that he's in some kind of cognitive
Yeah.
decline, and
Yeah.
there's probably a shadow government that's been
Yeah.
running the show for the past 2 years. So voting for someone like Joe Biden would be basically still voting for like the shadow government. So I don't know what happens. I think they still have a bit of time to change their candidate. So I think we might get an outset like that. Maybe I'm thinking too forward, and maybe he gets replaced by a Hillary. But I think it's too little, too late for me. I think Trump ends up taking it
That
and he's
is
going back to
wild. I
office.
mean, you've
Yeah.
touched on a lot of things there, but just this last thing that you touched on, I think it's so wild that Americans are sort of, I mean, it's a lot more, it's a lot less complicated than us because they only have two choices, whereas we had like a long list of options. But I feel like it's so weird that they have this two options, but none of the options seem to make sense. It's almost like
Yeah.
we're in the same situation, but not entirely the same. So it was quite interesting to even see the debate and how that was going, and also to see how actually people do support Trump. Like there's like he has this polarizing effect where people are like no to him, and then there's like a group of people that are like yes, but the yes is so silent that you think it's not existent
Yeah.
until things like this happen, and then you see like okay, this guy has like he reminds me of Jacob Zuma to some extent, but I mean extremes. Anyway, I don't know what I've been thinking about. So I think cricket, the Proteas made it through, I think, to the finals. I was so shocked. I wasn't even following it until the results came out. And then when they came out, I was like, oh my word, actually, maybe this is worth watching. They gave me a bit of a Bafana effect. You know, like last end.
Because they do bottle.
Yeah, they
a
do
lot.
bottle things a lot, and I wasn't trying to follow the T20 as such, but like because they're in the finals now, I'm like, okay, maybe I should put out my jersey, and support the team. So I do think like, we should get behind them. Like, good luck to the guys. I hope they make us proud. They win this one thing. At least they have like a World Cup in their bag. I guess they're the only national team that doesn't have one. So I'm really following that. I think the other thing I'm actually thinking about was like this interview I saw or watched, and it's an old interview of what's this guy? He just had a show on Netflix. We'd speak about him a lot. Vince Staples. And he was talking about how with black people, I think he was doing an interview and he was talking about how with black people we sell pain and trauma. And it almost like he was leaning towards like black people using pain as a catalyst for creativity. And it just got me thinking, you know, like some of the best albums that like I like are from artists who were like going through a really terrible spot. Either they were coming up, so they didn't have dough, they didn't have money, so they like, you know, had to scrape around and they were struggling. Or like they were just depressed, fam, like depression. They were in the trenches and
I think I sort of relate because most of the albums that, especially hip hop albums that I like, it's probably when the artist was still underground, they still in the gutters, they still struggling, they still hungry. So I think there's some level of creativity that people get from pain, or maybe pain is some sort of catalyst for creativity. But in the same sort of breath, I feel like we also shouldn't fall victim to the idea of fetishizing pain.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, like, yes, I feel like because you're feeling so much and pain takes out a lot from you, you feel a lot, it does allow you to be creative. But I think like we should tap into this essence of like creating from happy places, because if you can create so much from like pain, from like sadness, there surely is something that's greater that you could create from like a happy place, right? And I would also like to say, like, if you think about it, pain has been kind of what is pushed in the media, so we gravitate towards a lot of painful
rags
experience,
to riches.
right? Like those stories. Even as South Africa, I feel like we like the underdog story, the story of somebody that came from nothing and now they like, which is somehow like grows towards the, like it leans towards the whole pain territory or trauma territory. Whereas I feel like we should celebrate more of those stories of like people just coming from like people coming from wealth and making it.
I've started becoming an advocate for nepotism. It's like if you're in a position to put your family, your little cousins on, put them on.
And
you know, people don't need to struggle as much as you struggle.
And it's not new. I think especially I feel as black people, we feel like, oh, like if I get this, if I make it and I come from money, it's like, my achievement is a little bit less than if somebody came from the gutters and they made it. But I feel like, if my mom can finance my dreams,
life is not
like
group work.
Listen,
if you're in a position to leverage whatever connects, whatever resources you have access to, I feel like you need to do that. But obviously it does come with limitations if you want to grow in certain contexts, right? If you feel like yo, this limits me in terms of my growth, then expose yourself a bit more, right? Because you
Right.
already have access to a lot. Once you're inside,
Right.
reach for the stars.
Like, that's
Reach
what,
for the stars.
yeah, fair. Because I feel
Because I
like
feel like there's always a higher sort of
thing
thing
you can get
you
into.
can go for, yeah. So if you have access, you're just better off just fighting for more, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, yo, you need to struggle.
And also, if you think about the richest like people like currently in the world, like these guys didn't start from like zero. They started with like
Yeah.
connects. Their parents had some form of connect, either from their parents like donating or giving them that cash or taking them to like the best universities and
Yeah.
stuff. Like there's no need for like you. It's not a. I don't think it should be a requirement for you to struggle. So like we can celebrate your wins.
The book Outliers speaks
Yes.
on things like that, where even the people that are outliers,
They're not.
it's their life's sort of trajectory, not even their life's decisions,
Yeah.
because even winning the ovarian lottery, quote
You know what I
unquote,
mean?
like being born in the right place at the right
Yeah.
time, in the right country. Like someone born in the same year that you were born, but born in Syria is
It's
so much worse
exactly,
off, right? But someone born in
exactly.
Singapore, same year that we were born, is like so much better off, right?
Yeah. And I like what Malcolm Gladwell does in that book because he actually shows you the stats of like the different sports and how those people that actually make it had all these sets of events that were like in their favor. Like you can see actually from the data that this is
Yeah.
actually real. So yeah, I like that has been something I've been thinking about. And I feel like it's also in my mind as well to like for myself to because I always sometimes feel like if I achieve something and I didn't struggle for it, then it's not worth celebrating. But like now I want to celebrate even the small wins, where I make it to KFC right on time and there's like two people in front of me. I'm going to celebrate that because
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's what it is. Even if like I achieve a little thing that just makes my life a little
I
bit
saw
better.
something about
it's
how we're
fine.
not really capable of getting anything.
Why?
Like,
How?
think about anything that you would want to get as an achievement, anything
Yeah.
that you'd want to work towards, right?
Yeah.
Something or someone is capable of making you not get it. So say you want the next milestone is a job, right? Someone could literally just not give it to you. Like a single
yeah.
individual that's responsible for making that decision could say, I just don't like this person, right? Or it could be
Anything.
it could be anything. But in life, something very minuscule could change the
Yeah.
trajectory of something that you think you are entitled to.
Yeah, but do you believe in coincidences? Like things just happening randomly?
I'm more synchronicity.
Okay.
I'm more synchronicity. So like me bumping into you at Kendrick's show and then the beef sort of happening around the same time we dropped the pod
Yeah, okay.
is sort of synchronicity to me.
I get that. But I also like
It's not
to
it didn't just happen.
yeah. But I also think like the idea of independence does not really exist if you think about it, because I don't think you can exist in like a vacuum where you just depend on your own strength or depend on your own abilities. Even just thinking about it from a physical perspective, right? Like even if you're like, oh no, I'm going off the grid, I don't want to depend on the government for anything, or I'm just gonna live my life. You're gonna have to wear something, right? And if you're like, oh, I'll make my own clothes, you're gonna get to you have to get the fabric from somewhere else. You have to get the machine from somewhere else, the needle from somewhere else. Like we're all kind of dependent on each other in some level or another. So the idea of like independence and you just existing in a little vacuum kind of does not exist.
Yeah, it defeats the purpose.
It defeats the purpose. But then if you think about it, if we're all going back to the whole pain being a catalyst for creativity and kind of things happening, it's like if we're all creating from like painful experience, doesn't that kind of feed off the entire ecosystem in some way? In that if I create heartbreak music, like, and sometimes I could think about this, like when I was a kid, I used to listen to heartbreak music, but my heart was never broken.
I was listening
Nobody broke my
to
heart.
I was listening to someone talk about skill regression, right? And they were talking about skill regression in a positive context, in that one of the things that we don't talk about enough, but that happens as you grow older, especially 20s, is skill regression, where you used to play a sport, but you just start stacking at it, or you were good at a certain thing and you just become bad at it, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was very good at chess when I was young, but then the last time I played a chess game, like I was disappointed in how I was playing. Like I
feel
was so,
that.
because it's like you need to
feel-
work on your idea muscle consistently,
Yeah.
so to be sharp enough to play at the level that you can be proud of.
And you have to be conscious of it. Like you have to actively think about like exercising that muscle. Because if you
Sure.
don't do it, it like deteriorates. Like I was speaking to somebody we went to high school with.
Sure.
And they were like in the top 10, like proper, like all over. And they were like to me, like, yo, I just feel like I'm getting dumber, fam. Like I feel
No,
like
it's skill regression. It's normal. It's normal, but you need to also be nice with yourself. So what she was saying, right,
Yeah.
was basically that I think the skill she was talking about specifically was masking, right? And she
Okay.
said that she became very good at masking because she was a version of herself that was appealing to society, or was appealing to the world, right? So she knew how to communicate in effective ways to get what she wanted to get. But the repercussions of that were she wasn't being herself. So that took a toll in the long term. So at the time, so like right now, she's at a point in time where she doesn't really care too much about what society thinks
So
of
she can-
her. She's in a good place. And so she's, that sort of skill of masking has regressed, because when she's in social setting, she's not trying to be someone
Somebody
she's
else.
not,
I
or
get
someone that
that.
fits into.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that because there's just speaking about like speaking kindly to yourself and actually recognizing when you're not being yourself and trying to fit into the space or like the different spaces. Last year I was part of this coaching program and the coach was saying like, oh, you need to work on yourself and you need to do better. I was like, yo, sometimes these things that like the things I say to myself, the negative things that like I do are actually the reason why I'm so good at what I do, or like I'm so good at like moving around in spaces, being successful. Like
Pain is
she
a catalyst for
like,
growth.
again, pain is a catalyst
Yeah.
for growth,
Yeah.
right? And she was like, yo, it might work now. It might work now. Like you can speak to yourself like that and be like, yo, I'm just getting dumber. Oh, like, and use those skills that actually make you look better in front of people and not being yourself. But like in the long term, it actually catches up with you. So your body and your life will force you to actually take care of those things and actually start thinking about it. But yeah, the other thing actually I saw, which was so interesting because you know me and space exploration, like that's my thing. I saw, and this is not.
Oh, the Boeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask you about that, because for me, I don't understand what that means. You know, what the implications of something like that are, because it seemed to me, I read about it, like,
Yeah.
yes, people were stuck on, I think,
The international.
yeah, but I forgot what it's like, the code, the name of the star something, but it's Boeing's jet.
Starlink or something like
Starlink
that.
is SpaceX's,
But I'm
but it's
thinking
called
of
something along the lines of
yeah.
Star. But I heard it's stuck in space, right? And it's got people
Or
in it.
Starliner.
Starliner.
That's what it is.
Starliner stuck in space, and there are people in it.
Yeah.
Right? So, but then they seemed like they're not too worried about the people.
Yeah.
It's not moving, it's not coming back, is what I was getting. It's not gonna come back. It's gonna stay there for a bit because there's something happening. Is it
Yeah.
turbulent? Is it? So I wanted to understand, like, what exactly was going on. Are they back? When will they come back? What's the
Look,
limitations? What are the limitations? Yeah.
The last time I checked, they were not back. They were still there. I think they were supposed to come back yesterday, and then something happened. They didn't come back. So also I had to go and read up on this stuff because the other thing about the space stuff is like it's not readily available. You have to go out and look out for it. So it's not especially in a South African context, it's not in your face as much. So you have to actively, like, if you see a heading, go into it, dig into it, and find information. So what I could find actually was that, like, there was a leak in the propellant. I think it's helium that was leaking. And I think even before it took off, there were some issues. It was delayed. The takeoff was delayed. And even before they actually took off, like on the same day, there was a leak that they saw, but they were like, I think they just thought it would be fine or whatever. They would still make it. And then when they actually got there, okay, obviously the leak was a little bit more than they expected. And the worry is now is actually how they get back to Earth and how that landing will affect us in Earth, right? Because I think if you so the people are fine, but the more worry is like you have to land in a specific way at a specific setting in like a specific environment. If it's not able to land in that space in like a proper environment, then it affects us in like on Earth, right? So it's not just as I think they're in space, they're fine, there's nothing happening to them, they're okay. But how they land here could have actually like detrimental environmental impact, and just they don't know the extent at which we will be affected if they land as it is. So they're still trying to figure out that. But it's I think it's something that a lot of us should be going into. I am so interested in like getting young people involved in space exploration, especially young people from where we come from. Because
So like, okay, cool. Let's start here, right? I've always had a struggle with understanding what space entails, right? Because you come across Blue Origin fighting with SpaceX, fighting with Virgin Galactic about how far they went, where it's orbit, it's space. It's so what are the different levels and who has currently went the furthest in terms of like, and this is space travel in the commercial sense.
you see, just even from that, like the commercial sense of thing is, space is regulated by international law first as a whole, because actually space belongs to everybody. It belongs to all of us. We all are free to kind of explore space. That's based on like the Outer Space Treaty, which is like the kind of the Magna Carta of space exploration, because that's the treaty that most countries have signed into. So that treaty says space belongs to everybody. We can all go and explore and, you know, find things and whatever. But it does say that like you cannot necessarily use space for commercial purposes, which is kind of contradictory to what a lot of the American like space companies have been doing, where they go into space and they find stuff or like
But then I wanted to ask that who regulates that? Say I start a company, because like I heard arguably the next richest person could potentially be someone who goes into space mining. Could be the first trillionaire. Sorry, it's very likely that the first trillionaire could be someone that figures out how to mine in space. So, given that there isn't a clear regulation, who sort of oversees that currently?
Yeah. So you see, that's like everybody's kind of debate at the moment, because it almost seems like there's this treaty that's there that everybody's supposed to adhere to, that people have signed up to, or countries, states have signed up to, but they actually have their own local legislation that sort of contradicts this treaty that everybody is supposed to sign up to. And if you're a private company that lives like that has business in South Africa, you have to kind of adhere to South African legislation, but also in the broader sense, adhere to international law standards. But if your South African legislation allows you to do certain things, so it's like, you know, this weird conundrum that people have to kind of, or even states have to kind of
obviously
look
there's
at.
also the space race on top of that, where Russia wants to do better than China wants to do better than the States.
Exactly. And there's also people pushing as much as they can. I think I know China does not have, like, I could be wrong, could be corrected, but China does not have proper legislation around space. They have what they call white papers. And white papers are some form of regulation, and they add to kind of the research and technical stuff that could happen. But it's not like saying right or wrong. type of
Okay,
thing,
yeah.
which is, you know,
Doesn't
also
govern anything.
which is also kind of debatable. And given the fact that even the space exploration stuff started in like militaries around the world, like countries wanted to find out how far they could push this war and kill each other in the most, you know, in the most easiest way. So they tapped into that. I mean, there's regulations around that to say, okay, you can't use space for warfare or things like that. But it means that there's a lot of information that is not available to the public because of the fact that it originated within this confidentiality space of like the military and all of that. So it's really a touch and go type of situation where people have to like, I guess that's the reason why a lot of people, we need to be interested in it and get into it in different forms, from a legal perspective, from a scientific perspective. Just try and get ourselves in there, because it's almost like, you know, when like colonization happened, Africa was not part of the conversation. We were the conversation. We were the piece that was being cut in that conversation. It almost feels like that again, where the countries that have a lot of money can invest in it, can do whatever, and they can push the boundaries as much as they
that
can.
kind of makes me think of, there's a book I once read, I think it's Homo Deus, right, that speaks on the future human. And in the book, they speak of a useless class, right, where
That's painful.
the author speaks of a useless class where we're going to get to a time where someone's not going to have a skill that anyone can use for anything. And then they'll be classified, those kinds of individuals are going to be classified as a useless class. So it really gets me thinking about something like that, where people have access to space travel. Imagine you don't have the kind of money to take your child on a space trip, right? And then your child goes to school after the holidays and someone else is talking
like-
about, yo, we were in space.
We were in Mars.
So
fam.
it also sort of like, for me, space travel is, I don't want to say a motivator, but it's like, it would be nice to have an abundance of wealth so that I can experience Earth as like this globe. And yeah, but back to my main question, like what are the different layers and who's gotten the furthest?
I think at the moment I think Japan, the US, obviously, because they have NASA, and I think country we don't speak about as much. Now I'm forgetting the name. I'll come back to it. But I think obviously Russia is within that, and China, obviously. But for me, the most surprising one is Japan, because I didn't think they would be part of it. But I think they're actually leading some research between the moon and Earth. There's like a black hole that they're exploring, that they're furthest at, and it made recent news actually that they actually were able to explore that part of the Earth and actually come back. So it's also a thing of countries are excelling in different spheres of it. Some people are looking at space travel, which is big in America. Like there's private companies that are doing a lot of work in that. Also NASA is like a lot of that research, a lot of looking at whether we can go into the moon and even further go into Mars. Some people just looking at using space for mining and getting helium and hydrogen so that they can bring it back to Earth and even make space exploration cheaper. So there's all these different layers that different countries are looking at. And so it's very difficult to even say like which country is further at the space. It looks as though America is doing the most, but there are these little nuggets that we actually need to look at as well, like what I just said about Japan, that are actually making the strides and actually moving forward.
And it's always nice to be working on something and you're the underdog.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why I'm also, when I think about Pan-Africanism, I think about it in that context where it's like we are not part of the conversation. So no one's paying attention.
But
so
isn't that, sorry to cut you off, Mesh,
Yeah.
but like when you said underdog, alarms went in my head, because we're just talking about this underdog story that we're all in love with. That like we love the underdog story.
Yeah.
We love it. But yeah, back to your point.
Yeah,
Joe.
you're right. It would be nice for Africa to start competing at the highest level but with an abundance of resources, right?
Yeah.
Where we're not doing it from just scrambling for crumbs.
Yeah,
It would be nice where,
yeah,
so back to
yeah.
the whole, let's not fetishize the rags to riches story. Like, it would be nice for the abundance of money. Like, I was watching an episode of Dragon's Den. Might be
Yeah.
Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, can't remember. But someone was pitching a board game.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, and that's what I was saying about ideas last week, in our previous episode, where people in the West have that abundance to have ideas
Yeah.
that are less,
Yeah.
impactful, less societal. So I
Yeah.
was like,
They're
yo,
not
it would be,
solving socio-economic
it would be
problems.
nice for a young 14 black South African child to create a board game.
Yeah.
Right? To go
Yeah.
into a den and pitch a board game
Yeah.
about dynamics of a township or whatever. That was a board game specifically on football and different teams in the Premier League. But I was like, it sucks that kids don't have that privilege as much.
To just explore
Yes,
stuff,
you from
know.
time to time you will get fun ideas come out of a country like a continent like Africa, but most of the time it's like really, really serious things.
But it's because we're forced to think about the serious stuff from a very young age. Like if you live in a household where there isn't food and maybe your mom or the parents aren't able to go out and get the food, you start having to think about like when your next plate is going to come from, and you start having to go out and look for that food. So I think that's in the context of Africa. Like we're trying to kind of look to our parents, the government, the people that are supposed to be solving problems, and they're like, hey, give us something, but they're not really solving the problems in the way that they can. And sometimes it's really like they can't solve all the problems. Like we also need to step up. So we as the kids, or we as the people under their leadership, start thinking like, what can I solve? What can I bring? Even if as a child you're supposed to be thinking about playing outside and doing all these fine things and worrying about which, like, I don't know what color you like or small things like that. If there's no food at home, you start thinking about the more serious things. So I think that's kind of where we are, as a country as a whole. But just generally speaking about the space exploration thing, I really wish we could have more conversations about that, even from an African perspective, how we, before all of this was documented in books and, it was taught to us from like a Western perspective. How did we as Africans interact with astronomy? And how did we know it was the end of the month? Like small things like that we could get. I really wish we could have more conversations about that, and also document that history so that we can then think about the future and what we want for ourselves in that, kind of sphere. But yeah, I was also thinking about this in the sense that, like, when you say like you would like to have a lot of money so you can have your kids travel and go into space, it got me thinking about the IT conversation, the AI conversation we're having the other time, because a lot of people were like, yo, we like that conversations because we are worried about like just jobs, our jobs in general. And like if we're ready for the next kind of like wave, if the careers we're in will have us get enough money to be able to travel into
AI
space.
proof, yeah.
To be able to travel, you will get enough money to like survive just in general. So yeah.
What are your thoughts on universal basic income? Because back to the useless class thing, right?
Yeah.
One of the arguments for universal basic income is probably something like the fact that a useless class will exist in the future, where people will need to be getting some sort of stipend to survive, right? I've thought about that quite a lot, so I think you can go, so I don't cloud your opinion. But what are your thoughts on giving people a basic income to just survive? Because
I think, sorry.
yeah, but basically, what I wanted to basically explain is we're going to obviously tax the companies that are using the robots in that kind of world because they'll be making so much more money. And then what we tax them, we give people that can't work a basic living wage.
I guess I'm like twofold. I guess that's my life story, but like I'm twofold on it because I'm like, firstly, like if it's universal and it's the same, how does it affect people living in different areas of the world? Like if you live in South Africa
Assume
and
let's ceteris paribus this. So let's assume it people will be getting what makes sense
relevant,
relative to the economy that they're in.
I don't know. I feel like, yeah, still two folds, because I feel like one, I would like it to be the conversation to be about how do we help people to not become part of the
Useless
useless
class.
class. Because if we're I mean, if we can see that this thing is coming, why are we not kind of thinking about ways to make sure that people are fully equipped to exist in the world that's coming, right? So that that class does not exist in the first place. However, if it is like, if it's something that we cannot avoid, if it exists, I think that, yeah, like if you're gonna depend on robots and replace people and get people out of the jobs, like you're gonna have to supplement that somehow. Because what are these people supposed to do if you haven't, if like right now we're thinking about it's going to happen, we're not mitigating the thing, we're not trying to come up with ways to make sure that it doesn't exist. You know that it's coming. That means you have ways of, you can think of ways to stop it. If you don't want to stop it, then think about putting in regs on it, then so that people can survive. Or else you're just going to have a situation where this useless class exists and they get kind of the worst. And I can't even think of what's worse than what we're currently experiencing in the world. So I guess from that perspective, I'd say, yeah, sure.
I think it's wrong to make people to be or feel less of.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
in as much as there are arguments for it, most the for me the cons outweigh the pros. Like it's wrong for people to feel like they can set people aside and say, "Yo, we're going to just pay you to,"
To just be
because now you're
useless.
just you're less of. Everyone wants to be maybe not economically active in the capitalist sense, but everyone wants to be getting up
The
to
pride,
something.
the pride of actually getting stuff for yourself.
Yeah,
Like,
getting something
yeah.
done. So for me, universal basic income, I'm not for it. Like I'm not for it at all. I think it's it's
It
it
puts
speaks to it's back to the whole idea that it's like the caste type system where it's a hierarchical structure in society.
and people decide, like they can say
Or
like,
feudalism, where you have kings and you have serfs.
yeah,
And this
yeah.
reminds me, there's this one tweet about um, how fast the Gautrain
Yeah.
sort of stairs are. It's like you'd swear the serfs are rushing to their lords.
Right, but is it
So
not?
it's giving that like serfs, lords
But it's
sort of
even
thing.
worse, because at least you're rushing. You feel some sense of pride because okay, I wake up in the morning and I go to work
I'm
and
rushing, yeah.
I get some cash. Whereas you're just sitting and people like they can do anything with it. So I hear you fully in that. Like it for
Yeah,
me,
but
it
I
sounds,
mean that kind of hierarchy. My point there was just like that kind of hierarchy where there's someone that's so higher up and someone
You
so
have to
lower down. Because I feel like it's dehumanizing.
it is.
Just to even think, if I was
is.
someone receiving a universal basic income, I'll be like, yo, there are people contributing to this world and building it and making it a thing.
And
I'm just here.
But think about it. Don't we have something like that in South Africa currently, where people are given
A social grant.
Not even a social grant, like 350s, because
It's called a social grant, and it's
like-
actually referred to as universal. The current case studies, if you research the current case studies of universal basic income, one of the references are our social grants.
Yeah, because I think I personally would prefer people working for their money, even if that 350, even if they were getting 350, but working for that 350, because I think it does something to your psyche where you are able to work for something. You think, oh, I got this 350. Okay, now I can work up on something else and get another 350 and get another, and build skills. You can ideas flow when you're doing something. If you're just sitting, bruh, like you become stagnant. If it's like what you were talking about, like skills regression. If you're not doing anything about anything, it becomes worse. Whatever it is that you were doing, you're gonna become worse off. So if you're just giving people money for just existing and being like, yo, those people will become even more dependent. They might even ask for more because they can't use any. Their brains are not working. Opposed to actually just fostering a culture of people working for their money and getting like what they need through their own skills, and developing that culture. So I fully hear you. And my sense is just like, I see how the world works sometimes, and it's like people can avoid things and they don't avoid them. They know they can avoid a situation, but for their own benefit, they don't avoid it, and it gets to that situation and they don't do anything about it. So if it ever does happen that's what happens, give people the money, fam. Like,
It's back to the zero sum, life being a zero sum game conversation. Some win, some lose.
yeah, sure. But anyway, it's almost the end.
Closing tradition.
I swear to you, this like time feels like it moves in
Yeah.
like 3 times speed when we're recording, and I feel like it's unfair, but we're here. So I have a question for you, Mesh.
Cool.
It's not a complicated question, but I think you're gonna have to think about it for a little bit. Woosa. So the question of the week this week is, if you could meet your older self, would you meet your older self? And if you had one question to ask your older self, so if you say, okay, yes, I'm going to meet my older self, if you have one question you could ask your older self, what would you ask?
I'm a big fan of like delayed gratification, and I know it's a bad trait. Like even when I get a good meal, like I'll delay eating it for as long as I possibly can. So I don't think I'm the kind of person that, given the opportunity to speak to my future self, I would.
I hear you.
I think I'm more someone that would, if I was given the opportunity to change my past and speak to my younger self, I'm selfish enough to.
So many things are going on in my brains right now because I want to ask 2 questions, right? What do you think about you makes you delay that gratification? Is it back to what we were talking about, that like you wanna
response? You're about to
struggle?
unleash traumas, because for me, and we'll have this conversation some other time. For me, I'm just so used to like rooting for myself because I don't come from a background where I was given props for things. It wasn't normal.
Yeah.
So I think there's trauma there, because these are conversations I've kind of had with my therapist, but it's like I think I delay it because it's up to me. Is how I feel. So I'm
you have the choice.
All the euphoria I'm responsible for. I'm not gonna get it elsewhere.
Got it.
So I wanna suck out as much euphoria as I can give myself as possible, because no one's gonna come and say, "Hey, you did well because
done.
now you're upper text bracket."
I hear you. Okay. And if you were to meet your younger self, what would you say? Like, what would you tell that kid?
Buy Bitcoin. Boy, in grade 9, woman 2011, 2012.
This reminds me, I saw a meme and they were like, I should have told my younger self to start buying a house.
Boy, that lunch money, those 20 rands. Those 20 rands were dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin.
Fam, I hear you. But yeah, I think if I was to meet my older self, if I have the opportunity to meet my older self, I don't know. I think meeting my older self in itself would be an answer, because like just how I would present myself and how I would be existing in like as my older self, I think it would answer a lot of questions that I have right now, because I have questions about like, like will my mind still remain the way it is? Like, will I still keep thinking about things the way I think about, like the creativity levels? Will I still be as creative as now? So I feel like just by seeing my older self, there will be questions that are answered just naturally. So I can't think of like one question that I would ask my older self.
That's the
But,
thing. Now you meet your older self and it's got dementia. You know that Bitcoin thing, reminds me of back to the memes. Like, hey, Dad, where were you when other parents were buying Bitcoin? The same way people talk about apartheid activists, like, and how we should ask our parents, like, where were
what are
you?
you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Fam. But yeah, I think this has been Untapped Tanzania, and this is our kind of second episode. Many more to come. Please do reach out to us on YouTube, our own personal Instagram handles. Talk to us. What would you like us to talk about? What are you tapping into? What is the one thing that like is on your mind right now? Hit us up. Talk to us. We'll talk to you back. And until next time, it's peace.
Sign for the
Peace
peace out.
sign for the peace out. We are outie.
Yeah.